What's up, marketers, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm Liza from X-Growth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shahin with X-Growth, and today I'm talking to Gabrielle Pirzad, Director, ABM Strategy and Global Programs at Cloud Software Group, about customer engagement and segmentation of your accounts when it comes to ABM. Segmentation of accounts is a big conversation in the ABM circles of how one should go about and do that segmentation. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about customer engagement and how Gabby and her team generate that customer engagement within their target accounts, and what are some of the examples that they've implemented and executed in their ABM programs. On that note, Gabby, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Very excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm sorry it's taken so long to arrange this. That's my fault, not yours, of course.
No, very, very excited. It's great that we got to do this, and I'm really excited of diving into this. ABM is dear to us. We love talking about ABM and the nuances of ABM. And maybe the first question that I like to ask and dive right in deep is about customer engagement. I'd like to first, if we could set the goalpost and set the or define the term itself. I'd love to know how you go about defining customer engagement in ABM.
Okay, so there's a generic definition which is really about customers that are responding with interest to the content we share with them. They are rocking up to events. They're connecting with our sales teams. They want to find out more. They even subscribe to communities. All of that sort of, to me, indicates, a reasonably engaged customer, particularly if they're going to all of those things. But what we have done in addition is to put some science to that. Now, I say science as an ex-scientist even, but it's mathematical genius is what I can say. And I wasn't a mathematician. So this is about, scoring all those interactions. And we talk about, marketing automation systems and how they score interactions, etc. But this is going a little bit further. So this is weighting them. This is looking at the different types of interactions. So if a customer actually registers to an event, that's good. That's some engagement. If they attend the event, it's obviously a more significant engagement. So, and there's a myriad of different contact points, touch points with a customer, of course. So that bringing all those together, weighting the importance of each of those touch points is really how we look at, getting an overall engagement score per account, per customer, across the business. It's an approach I haven't seen used before. As I say, I'm familiar with marketing automation. This isn't marketing automation. This is very different, a way of assessing how we're moving the needle with our customers. I think that makes sense. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. And I'd love to maybe ask another question, follow-up question on the back of that. So it sounds like that you and the team have built this system that you have one score that you kind of track, and everything kind of boils down to that score and it's not a lot of people who would be listening to this be like, oh, that's lead scoring, right? You score your leads, but it's not that. It's really looking at it across the account itself. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's looking at it across the account itself, but it's also looking across the universe of accounts. Overall, what is our customer engagement score? So across all the accounts that we serve, is that there is a total roll-up score. Good or bad, goes up and down, of course. But, any point in time, we can see what that engagement score is like. We can also see at an account level. We can also see, to some extent, a little bit more difficult at an individual level. But certainly we can tell how were impacting each account, for instance, or overall the effectiveness of our marketing in terms of moving the customer engagement needle. That's a different way to attribute marketing as opposed to, dollars, pipeline, and all that. We do measure that as well. But the number one is the customer engagement. And if you think our company has been through a lot of changes, a lot of transformation, almost a new company in itself as Cloud Software Group. So, we have to start somewhere. So we have to look at, how we're tracking and how we're bringing our customers along with the changes. You're looking confused.
Gabby, how does... No, I have a couple of questions that I want to ask on the back of that. The first one is probably around timeline. How does time impact this, right? Is this something that if you are not seeing engagement after a certain time, the engagement score goes down? Is it, are you looking at it across a quarter? Is it across a month? Is it across a year? Is it like rolling 12 months?
It's rolling. It's essentially, it's cumulative. So scores will go up and down over time. So it's at a point in time. It's whenever we choose to review it, if you like, which I think is pretty good. For instance, if you think about NPS, that's your customer relationship NPS. That's your customer engagement at that point when they take the survey. It doesn't mean that for the next 6 months until the next wave of surveys, they're going to be satisfied and think their account rep is amazing. That's not the case. You've got a point in time. We can measure that point of time as we go through. Scary, really.
Yeah, I love that, because just like you said, the next day they might have an interaction and they absolutely hate that interaction, and that NPS score could drop.
They gave us a 10
within a day.
If the next day. Yeah, they have an service outage. We don't respond. You don't know.
Exactly.
We've just cracked it. We've cracked the secret of marketing. I can't believe it. All
Gabby,
these years.
There's one more thing that you also mentioned that I want to hear a little bit more about. And you said that, it's not just all about the score. There's weights to things as well. Can you expand on that a little bit more, what you mean by that?
So, yes. So you and I, everyone is receiving stuff all the time. We're being marketed to death. And sometimes we choose to open an email. Sometimes we don't. Is that really, it doesn't mean because I've opened an email that I'm really engaged. Am I, even if I go and click on the link, does that mean I'm really engaged? Probably not so much. And also I'm just as likely to delete the email. In fact, there might be something really interesting in it, but I've missed it. So what we do is we weight the types of interaction. So that kind of clicks and opens, it gets a score, but it's just a blip in the sort of, in the tracking. But what is really important is so if we move up through there, what might be a stronger weighted activity would be something like content syndication, where they provide their details. Customers are pretty savvy these days. They know when they provide their details, they're going to get additional marketing. So because of that, they give their details anyway because they want to access, some interesting piece of content. So that's probably a slightly higher weighting, or it is a slightly higher weighting. And then we get round to, they actually come to an event, they register to an event. Okay, they get a slightly higher weighting because they're interested, because they register. I mean to go, I'm doing it all the time. I mean to go to that event, and then I don't show on the day, or I cancel because I'm very polite. So that gets higher. And then of course they attend the event. So that's probably the ultimate in engagement, is if they attend the event. I mean, that's not all the different. There's, as I say, a myriad of different touch points that we weight and we look at, but we can see that customer journey. And it's something, so I'm just going off at a slight tangent, because I remember at my last company, we did something where we mapped the buyer journey, and we started with a piece of content, and they looked at, and we showed all the content and all the activities that an account had been involved in, leading to a significant win, a piece of business, probably, tens of millions of dollars. And what we realized was, I mean, this may be really obvious to everyone, I don't know, that the piece of the content we sent at the beginning wasn't what they bought at the end. So you could say we're just white marketing then, but it isn't. I think it's something around, it's engaging with you as an organization. It's seeing some value. And then, sales, obviously, believe it or not, sales were part of this process too. No surprise. And sales were, in the meantime, working their magic, talking to the customer, we're drip feeding, we're inviting them to events, etc. And then, they shape the proposition. I would say that customer at the start of that journey wasn't in an active buying phase. They were, just mooching, doing a bit of research, but not actually thinking I'm going to renew or buy something new. And then, the journey shaped that way. And I think that's a lot of what we're doing here is we don't have the data yet to report back on how that is the journey of a life cycle of a win. But I think we'll have a similar pattern. I'm sure we will. So I can't remember where I was going with this, but yeah, so it's different levels of engagement.
The weights of, yeah.
Yeah. And also we would look at things like the NPS score, although I've said it's fixed in time. We will look at that as well, because that gives us some view on their level of satisfaction and engagement. And that's all part of it. If you hate the supplier, then are you really going to buy something? You might have to, but it's all part of the picture. I'm hoping I'm not making it seem more complicated than it is.
No, this is great. This is great. I guess the other question that I want to ask is what enables this, right? So especially from a technology perspective, there's a lot of data points that allows one to capture these signals in order to get that account score. How do you approach the technological side of this to be able to capture that information?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's quite simple in terms of the technology we use. So what I failed to mention was the fact we also use intent data. So we look at their intent. Do they appear to be researching or even looking at competitors? So we use demand base for that. That goes into the score. We also use our CRM. So the data from CRM, all our marketing programs will go through the CRM. So we can see, their levels of engagement with content, various touch points, whether they showed up to an event, etc. And then we kind of bring it all together in some wizardry that I'm not quite sure about. And it's kind of churned up and presented back to us in a sort of tool like Power BI, for instance. So we have a sort of moving dial that we can see, and we can see it by vertical, we can see it by account, we can see it by region. So yes.
Okay, got it. So it's a combination of the intent. Yeah, absolutely. Intent data, demand base, and the CRM, and then all that data kind of feeding into a data lake, which then,
yes,
with Power BI, the team will do the visualization for. Got it.
And we have some expert data modelers on the team, who can really sort of crunch those numbers or wrangle the data, whatever the technical phrase is. So yeah.
I love it. So let's talk about segmentation. And what I love to dive in is, what kind of data do you use for segmentation of all this kind of sources of data coming to you or signals coming to you? What are some of the critical ones that you and the team find yourself using quite often for segmenting the accounts that you're going after?
It depends on the type of ABM marketing that we're delivering. So for one to few, so we typically do one to few and one to many. So for one to few, we will really narrow, because we're talking about, say 15 accounts on average per sort of segment, per cluster. And we typically will pull data in terms of obviously pipeline, but also market insights. So, what is the market drivers in that particular vertical, in that particular region? What is their current share of wallet with us? What is their IT spend? All this kind of data on each account or suspect account, you like, for that cluster. So we pull all that data. We also look at their relationship with us. What is their current level of engagement? good or bad, indifferent. What is or are the relationships like on the account? So we can tell from our CRM how many, C-level, decision maker level relationships they have. What are the influencer relationships? So we measure that. We also look at very basic data, like, for instance, how many licenses they currently have, opposed to what may have. We also measure use cases. So we have a number of use cases per vertical that we would expect or we would aspire to for each customer. So we would look at the number of use cases. Reason for that, obviously, is looking for potential. So if they've got, I don't know, making up a number, 5 out of 5 use cases already implemented and they've got a zillion licenses, okay, exaggerate, then probably not such high potential to include in a cluster. So we're probably looking for the medium. We're looking for like someone that's not terrible and hates us, but someone that, there's potential for growth. Relationships are okay, not terrible, not necessarily fantastic, but again, available for growth. And, we know from that vertical that there are a number of market drivers which support our use cases, whether it's, certainly in Europe, in banking, there's DORA as a regulatory requirement coming in. So it affects all European banks, for instance. So we look at all of that, the whole landscape market data, as well as the firmographic data and our current levels of interest. We also put intent into that when we're selecting accounts for a cluster as well. Is that what you meant by the question, by the way?
Got it.
Checking.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In terms of what are the signals that they use for segmentation, that is, that's quite comprehensive as well. There's a lot of data that goes into it. And Gabby, has there been times or situations where sales comes to you and it's like, I want to include this account in an ABM program, and you look at the data and you're like, no, it's not going into my ABM program?
Yes, and it depends on how much support they have for that. Sometimes if they really want an account, I forgot one factor, actually. One factor is the level of engagement of the salesperson. So a couple of years ago, that was one of our selection, really rigorously part of our selection process. If we didn't think the account owner would be that engaged with marketing, then we discounted it. It could have had all the other fantastic attributes you'd want, but if we weren't able to engage in them, we're not going to do it. And the same applies. So in that example, if the account owner actually really wants the account in there, or his manager or his manager's manager, it may well be that's a good one to include because he really wants ABM. He gets what it is, and he's going to work with us. So that might sort of tip the balance in his favor. I don't know without looking at the individual ones, but we have had ones where we just haven't included them. And yeah, there will be people disappointed and people that don't understand the reasons. But if you've got an account that's already saturated, I know that the seller might be saying, well, there's nothing else we can do with it, so we need marketing. I don't think that's the answer.
That's a recipe for disaster down the line.
It is, absolutely.
Okay. That makes sense. Gabby, I want to talk about execution a little bit. And, obviously after segmentation and when one has selected their accounts, it's really about, okay, how are we going to engage these? What are the main steps you take to run these specific ABM campaigns after you've done the segmentation?
So I think one of the things that perhaps sometimes get missed, we try and do it well, is the kind of communication and enablement around the sales teams, for instance. Not just the sales teams, but corporate marketing, people that are going to be impacted by the campaign in some way. So, why are we doing it? What are the steps involved? I mean, we work extensively with corporate marketing, so that a lot of that enablement will kind of happen at the start of the content creation, for instance. So I think enablement is the first thing, is to really get the teams on board, particularly if there's actions required from them, which there often is. For instance, the sales teams, we might want them to send emails because a personal email is better than anything else. Or we might need more information on the customer. Again, it's all about communication. I think, over the years, the number of times a project or an initiative has gone wrong is because there has been, communication has failed in some way. So I think that's the first thing that we do is to communicate both the vision, the actual execution steps around that. What was the second thing we do? We'll just execute. Okay, so the second thing we do obviously is we've got a conveyor belt of content. So we early on in the process we create a blueprint for the campaign, which talks about what content, what are the expected results, if there's any further segmentation. So, for instance, when we started off, we did pretty much broad brush one-to-many ABM, but then halfway through the process, there was a kind of checkpoint where we're getting mostly technical audience, or we got a split between technical and executive. So there'll be a different track. So the technical customers will get more tech demos and things like they'd be interested in, whereas the execs were more based on business case and value like that. So they got the blueprint. We then, we do an awful lot of our execution in-house. We also do have some agencies that we use, but we're putting it into the plan. We're doing the awareness piece, working up to consideration, the standard sort of sales or customer journey, and measuring it as we go through that and course correcting. Does that answer your question, or is there something more specific?
Yeah, it does. It does. No, that process is pretty clear. Where and it definitely sounds like you spent a fair bit of time with the enablement piece to make sure that everybody's is on the same page before getting into that.
Yeah.
Do you have any war stories of times that maybe that enablement hasn't gone very well and it was a little bit harder to kind of execute on the program?
It can always be challenging. I think we're lucky at Cloud Software Group in that we have a really good relationship between sales and marketing. In my past life, in previous organizations, I would say it was not always so good. And we've had a few surprises. I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I think the evidence is that it.
So really good. I know I put you on the spot as well. And if it doesn't come to mind, that's fine.
Yeah. The thing I would say is the worst feeling in the world is when you're on a Zoom call or something like that, and your audience is obviously disengaged. You're doing your enablement. It's really important to you, and you can see they're typing. They're going through their emails, etc. So it's really, really difficult to when that happens, and to make it successful, I think it's got to be short, sharp, and try and avoid all marketing verbiage, marketing language, marketing tech talk or whatever. It just does not work.
Gabby, the last question that I wanted to ask is around around measuring the success of a program. And it's interesting because I get the feeling that we've come full circle. And you tell me if I'm right on this. When it comes to measuring the success of the program, would you go back to the same data that you looked at for segmentation? How do you approach evaluating the success of an ABM program?
I think it's quite simple, and it's a little bit cheesy, I'm afraid. So I think the 3 R's really work. Is just how you define them. So relationship, right? So customer engagement is part of this. Customer engagement score, has the dial moved on those specific accounts overall? That's an easy one. Number of new contacts. You can never have enough influencer / decision maker contacts. So we know how many we've got now, how many we've got at the end of the program, how many are generated by specific tactic. I think those are some of the key things. I know, in some business you would look at, speed of deal closure and things like that under the revenue. But I think it's the number of contacts, it's the level of engagement is the critical piece. In terms of reputation, and this is, I'm sure, the same for every business, is around, generating new advocates. So, how many customer stories, customer speakers, whatever we define as an advocate. How many do we have at the end of that program? Have we managed to onboard some new? Not totally associated with the program always, but it's another source of data. And then revenue, I have to say, it is revenue growth, annual recurring revenue. You can't get away from that. Yeah.
Of course. Okay, I love it. Gabby, I have some rapid fire questions for you, but before getting into the rapid fire questions, is there anything else that you think maybe I didn't ask or we should touch on that we didn't when it comes to customer engagement, segmentation, and some of the topics that we've talked about that you think it's important that we cover that we didn't?
I think the only thing around customer engagement, and again, it's a little bit cheesy, or maybe it's motherhood and apple pie, I don't know, but is that I'm really customer centric, annoyingly so, and you have to. I think your number one measure is engagement. The old adage, people buy people first, and all that kind of stuff really still holds true. So I think just to, I don't want to come across as though customer engagement is the nirvana for every answer to every question. However, it's the only way that anyone is going to generate revenue. And I actually no longer think it's account-based marketing. I think it's more like customer-based marketing, I think is a better term, because I think we're not just engaging the account. I think we're engaging the individuals. I think, I follow several people on LinkedIn that talk about, they're more B2C than B2B, but they're talking about engaging the consumer rather than engaging the account or engaging the marketplace. So I just want to emphasize that importance, because I think it gets missed. And I know that we don't have the budgets to, narrow our focus all the time, but I do think it's such a critical thing. And I would say that, wouldn't
I? Well, I really want to get to those influencers that you talked about, Gabby, and I think there's one question in the rapid fire questions that allow us to dig a little bit deeper. But let's dive in. The first question I have in the rapid fire question is, what is one resource? This could be a book, a blog, a podcast, whatever it is, a resource that has had a fundamental impact on the way that you work or live. What comes to mind?
Does it have to be a marketing book? Can it not be a marketing book?
No, it doesn't. Okay. Absolutely. It could be anything.
All right. Okay. So I'm very interested in psychology and human relationships and stuff like that. Years ago, I read a book by Sue Knight. I can't remember the title. Something like The Power of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It really changed my life. It really did. A, because I became really interested in NLP. B, I had some interesting situations at work, which I immediately started using it. And the bit that really stands out for me from that book was putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So I had a really difficult manager at the time, and I used to dread one-to-one meetings with her. But I used to, after reading that book and trying out some of the exercises, I used to go in that room and put myself in her shoes, looking at me, talking to me. And I thought that was amazing. And because of that, I went on, I qualified in NLP and stuff like that, because I was really interested in it. But I think in fact, I even ran sales NLP courses, which are a little bit awkward. But anyway, but it's an important skill, isn't it? It's mirroring and matching. It's talking about what your customer wants to hear. It's body language, it's words, it's everything. It's what you see, hear, feel, etc. But I thought that was important.
That's a great recommendation. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Second question. If you could give only one advice to B2B marketers, what would it be?
I'm trying not to be sarcastic now. Okay. So one piece of advice I would say is about don't sweat the small stuff. It's go to the heart. I've been in ABM so long now that I'm completely biased, but I really think you have to get to the heart, talking your customers' language, look at what they read, what they do, where they play, and put yourself in their shoes. Sorry, it's a recurring theme.
No, that's great. Third question, Gabby, is influencers. Who are some of the people that you follow in the sales and marketing space? And they could be from B2C as well as B2B.
I've just remembered, I realised I can't remember her handle. So I can't pronounce her name either. Her name is Kathleen Borgin, and she talks about B2C and why people buy. Bourgoen, Kathleen. And she's amazing. I just subscribe to her daily, weekly newsletter, and there's always something in it. I think, well, that's really true. So there's that. And then for sales and marketing, so this was a top tip that a salesman gave me actually a while ago. So I'm really fascinated by social media, and I really appreciate we all need to get better at it because it's really powerful. And I, of course, want sales to get better at it as well. And so I follow someone called Brandon Lee. He's in the US. And I wrote it down because I couldn't remember it. So he's got a sort of newsletter, I guess, from LinkedIn. He's based on LinkedIn, called Social Outreach and Prospecting. And he does sort of podcasts on social outreach and prospecting. I can't speak.
Prospecting. Yes.
Yeah, I got there in the end. And he also has a series of podcasts called Modern Revenue Generation series. So they're really good. They're quite engaging. He has guests on there. He says some really cool stuff about using social media. I think for any seller that is unsure, not convinced, or starting out using LinkedIn, for instance, he kind of sells it to you why you should do it and tells you how you should do it. Like the last newsletter actually was on your content, what you write, and again, it was all about personalizing it. But anyway, so yeah, two favorites.
Amazing.
Top tips.
Yeah, two great tips right there. People to follow. Last question, Gabby, is what is something that excites you about B2B today?
What excites me is how it's evolving. If you compare to, 20 years ago, it's so different. So I think AI, everyone's excited by AI. I think the potential there is great. So I don't know how that's going to evolve. I can't imagine how that's going to evolve. But being able to shape your content, personalize your content to your customer is really helped by AI for sure. The other thing that I really like are some of the personality insights tools that are out there. For instance, there's one called Crystal Knows, which is scarily accurate. And you think, how did they just get that from my LinkedIn profile? Are they stalking me? But I think it's amazing, really, really amazing. So they got a free plug there, but I think it's really good. So, and I see more and more of that happening. And I know I work at IBM, and they obviously were big on AI, and part of that was personality insights as well. And I thought that was great. I think due to data privacy issues and that's probably not made so much of now, because it wasn't just using LinkedIn. It was using everyone's sort of social media and sort of data sources on an individual. But again, the potential, obviously in the wrong hands, not good, but the potential to truly personalize, I think is fantastic.
Gabby, this has been an amazing conversation, and I want to just say thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been so much insight from segmentation, customer engagement, ABM in general, the process, and obviously some of the great tips at the end with the rapid fire questions. So I just want to say thank you for your time, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great. Thank you.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Alexander Hipwell and Liza Maywald. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Alexander and Liza. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make the show without you. Growth Colony is hosted by Shahin Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just keen for a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week, right here on Growth Colony.